Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Behind the Curtain. As usual, I'm your host, Pedro DeLuca, and today my very special guest, the man with the greatest facial hair in professional wrestling, the innovator of aerial insanity, M-Dogg, Matt Cross. Matt, thank you for joining me here today.
How you doing?
The whole purpose of Behind the Curtains is to get behind the man that we see in the ring. We know what you can do in the ring, but we want to know what makes up your character. So first off, what made you fall in love with professional wrestling?
I liked it as a child, just the pageantry, the insanity, the Hulk Hogan's, Dusty Rhodes, Jake the Snake, but then I lost touch for quite a long time. And it was ECW that rebirthed my love of wrestling. Josh Prohibition wanted me to come over. He's like, hey, you gotta check out this wrestling. And I was like, nah, man, I'm good. And he's like, you gotta check this thing out. And he talked me into it, and I went over there with an idea of what wrestling was in my head. And when I got there, I see New Jack jumping off everything, bleeding. I see Shane Douglas swearing. I see naked ladies running around. I see super crazy, jumping off everything in the world. I see Tajiri kicking people in the faces. And I was just like, what is this? This is not even wrestling. This is a completely underground, crazy thing. That fan base, the insanity, people standing. My background was I love hardcore punk rock. Till the day I die, I'm gonna love punk rock. So that feel to me was the punk rock. It was just these people, part of something small, part of something that they had organically made, and just going nuts. And I loved it. And I was like, this speaks to me. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to watch, emulate, and that rewoke wrestling for me.
Okay, now that you've fallen back in love with wrestling, how did you get your start in professional wrestling?
We started emulating the ECW stuff that we saw on TV, in my buddy Josh's backyard, and just trying to do what we had seen, just from a small town in Ohio. We're bored, nothing else to do, let's beat each other up in the backyard. Based on that, we had some notoriety going, so we got the Best of Backyard Wrestling tapes, and then the Best of Backyard Wrestling video game, and one thing kind of led to another. We were approached by JT Lightning, who ran a school in this very building where we are, and he had told us that when he has students, most of them can learn the basics, but then they can't progress past a certain point because at their very core, they're not athletes. I had just finished 11 years, or was in the process of finishing an 11-year gymnastics career, and he said, you're already doing these so-called advanced maneuvers, you just need to learn the basics. And he said, if you let me train you, I think you can go far in this business. So with that in mind, I sat down and thought about, is wrestling something that I truly want to pursue or not? I never had any idea or thinking that, if I do this sweet backyard wrestling, I'm gonna make it to WWE. I never thought that for a second. I knew it was what it was. It's bored kids in Ohio. So as soon as I decided that I want to pursue professional wrestling, I started training with JT, who's unfortunately no longer with us, but again, this is his building, so it's kind of cool that we're back here and we're still doing it, and under his tutelage, we began, and then the rest is history.
Take us into your very first match. Do you tell us a little bit about your opponent, your style, what made you in your first match?
It's difficult to say what my first match was because we actually got booked on legitimate independent shows before we were trained. So
after the training from JT.
Yeah, again, it's so, because it was I was wrestling throughout that whole period, so I don't have this one moment where it's this is my first match and now I know what I'm doing. I mean, even JT had booked us on a show as backyard wrestlers and was like, look, just do what you guys do. And looking back at it now, it's hilarious because we just started and it was just chaos from the first second because I was like, let's just go nuts, because that's what I loved at the time before we had learned some of the intricacies of the sport. But I don't really, it was kind of a muddy gray area of from backyard to training.
Well, from going from the backyard, getting trained by JT, you exploded all over the wrestling scene. It would take us forever to list all the promotions you've worked for. From Ring of Honor, Wrestling Society X, just all over the world. You've been to Germany, you've been to England, you've been Australia. Just take us through a couple of the key moments in your early career there.
Yeah, I've had a lot of, it's really crazy because I think back to just being in Josh's backyard. And I had some inclination as a little kid of maybe someday I'll wrestle in Japan and Mexico. I was aware that there was wrestling there. So I guess part of me hoped to someday wrestle there without even understanding how to go about that, or in a complete dream sense. I would have never guessed or even thought there's wrestling on the island of La Reunion off the southern coast of Africa, or that there's wrestling in Egypt, or that there's wrestling in Colombia, or that I'm going to go to Australia with Hulk Hogan, or all these things that I didn't even know that I've been able to do, that I'm very proud of, because I don't think many people in wrestling at large get to do, let alone on an independent level. So some of those highlights, I wrestled in front of 72,000 people at the Stade de France in Paris, France, which is where France had won the World Cup, I think in '98, so it's an enormous stadium. And we wrestled for a pre-show before a rugby game championship match there. So to have that feeling, and I think that year, this was 2007, I think it was the record of a wrestling crowd. So it's like I've wrestled in front of WrestleMania-sized crowds, bigger than WrestleMania-sized crowds. So that was definitely sticks out to me to see that. And doing Hulk Hogan's Hulkamania tour Australia was very special to me. I mean, these are the same venues that WWE ran. I was one of, if not the only guys that wasn't former WWE. So to be on that level and schedule and with those type of guys was really stuck out to me. I've wrestled Ultimo Dragon 13 times, so I think outside of Josh Prohibition, who I began professional wrestling with, I've had the most matches in my career with Ultimo, which is crazy if I stop to think about it. Before he passed away, I was in the ring. I had 2 matches with Mitsuharu Misawa. If you don't know, is like the Hulk Hogan of Japan. So I've just been able to do some really crazy things.
Now, as your career progressed, is there one particular match or opponent that was your absolute favorite match?
That's so hard to answer. I mean, I don't know if anyone in wrestling could really answer that, because you can't pick one, because there's so many different things. Like on one hand, I wrestled in front of 72,000 people. I want to be like, wow, that was the coolest. But then I've had matches in front of crowds of 100 where wrestling is so weird. It's unlike anything else. It's like you can have these moments where like magic, for lack of a better term, is truly created. One of those that I remember specifically was me and Sanjay Dutt at CCW's Cage of Death, I believe 5. And it's just something about the atmosphere and the people and everyone there in South Philly packing into the old ECW arena. It was that magic, everyone had bought into these stipulations and bought into the match and was certain. It was a loser leaves. Everyone was certain that Sanjay was leaving. He had signed with TNA Wrestling, so as soon as people saw the stipulation, they just naturally assumed that Sanjay's on the way out. And so to work under those parameters and for everyone to be so into everything, that sticks out for me. And I've spoken with Sanjay and himself as well. Because we said we can't answer that question. We get asked it all the time, and it's so hard to answer. And we both kind of came to this roundabout way of being like, maybe that's the match that is our best. So
You had previously mentioned WWE, and where a lot of people know you from is your stint on WWE's Tough Enough, where it really put M-Dogg Matt Cross on the national stage above and beyond Wrestling Society X or XPW. Tell us about your experience with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, he's great. I mean, I would actually disagree that it put me on the map at all. I don't think that I've gotten even so much as one booking out of it. So
really?
I don't believe that it did very much for me at all. It just angered people that already were aware of me, is what I've taken from it.
I will admit, I was one of those. What?
Yeah, I don't think I've had even so much as one person come up to me and be like, I found out about you from Tough Enough, or I saw you on Tough Enough.
Well, I retract that question, but can you tell us?
But I mean, it was obviously an amazing experience. I mean, here you were in a house that was for sale, $75 million. Yeah, if anyone's interested. Living amongst Stone Cold Steve Austin and these other hopefuls and training other build them out and stuff. And yes, Stone Cold Steve Austin was great. I've kept in touch with him post-show, which has been the biggest perk of being on the show and something that I never would have expected. And something that he obviously doesn't need to do. It wasn't part of his contract to pick one or two of these guys and help them out or do something with them. So he's obviously gone above and beyond, in a schedule that involves actively being a part of movies and TV shows and God knows what else. So I mean, he's a very genuine guy. He cares a lot about the business, and it was a great experience. That was the biggest thing that I got out of it. Outside of some lifelong friendships with our contestants. I mean, Michael Zaki was awesome. Christina was great. I mean, a lot of the men and women on the show I thought were really good. But yeah, the biggest perk, if you will, of being on the show is being able to stay in touch with him, which I would have never expected, and is obviously awesome.
Now that you're back on the independents, what is the goal of Matt Cross? Is it to get back to WWE? Is it to get to TNA? Is it just to keep going on the independents? Get a full-time gig in Japan?
I want to make a living in professional wrestling. I want to make a living doing what I love, and I feel like to do that at this point is to go to the WWE. I don't consider going back, because doing a reality show that was filmed, by and for a reality production company, it really was independent of WWE more or less. So I would like to go there and be seen for what I can do. very possible. It went from when you started out 10 or 11 years ago being like this distant dream of like, maybe I can someday, to now watching wrestling is such an odd experience, to be honest. I mean, you turn it on and you're like, oh, there's Evan Bourne, my buddy, wrestling Seth Rollins, my buddy, with CM Punk, my buddy, versus, you know, just the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And even going there and watching it, you're like, I have some kind of personal story experience or have wrestled with every person here, or certainly the majority. And it becomes such a weird thing of like, you had this dream of like, maybe someday I can do this to like, every person I know has done it. So I can certainly do it. It's just a matter of getting that chance, getting that opportunity. So, you know, I'm going to keep plugging away until I can. I've been to 17 countries so far. I have my personal goal set at 20. So I just want to keep having fun. You know, this is fun for me. I want to keep traveling, enjoying the world. And like I said, I would like to make a full-time living doing that. And I'd like to do that with the WWE. So hopefully sometime I get that opportunity.
Well, Matt, we could spend hours and hours talking about your career. I've known you for a very long time, watching you in this building when you first started out. But let's focus a little bit about right now, AIW. You could be pretty much considered an AIW original. You've been with the company on and off for several years now. You're a former AIW Tag Team Champion. Where is Matt Cross going to be in the next few years in Absolute Intense Wrestling?
Yeah, I think I was even on the first show ever.
I believe you were.
Just gunning for the top, you know, like I always am. I want to leave a mark. You know, I want to, I'm at a point in my career where I'm not just a match on the show. I'm not just something that people will see. I'm something that people will hopefully come to see, and hopefully they can leave and feel like they've got their money's worth. Because, I mean, again, it's been something I've been doing weekend and weekend out for 11 years. So, I mean, what people, I think it helps for them to keep in mind that they don't really think about is like, in 11 years, without canceling one match and doing it every weekend, there have certainly been times where I've been sick or tired, or someone broke up with me that day, or some family member passed away the day before, or I'm missing a graduation, or I'm missing my own graduation, which I did to go to Hawaii. I mean, there's so many things on our minds that people, I think, tend to overlook. And even despite all that, and with all that, we all welcome that, because this is what we want to do. And I want to do that, and I want to do this, and I want to be here. And then, like I said, I want to have matches that people remember, and I want them to be excited to come see me, because they know that no matter what, I'm going to leave my all in that ring and then try to at least do something they've never seen before, or have fun with them, and then just feel like they came out. And on a day like today, it's, you know, it's February, it's freezing, and then people are already standing in line out front waiting to go. So, yeah, you know, that means a lot to us, and I want to keep that in mind when I have my matches, and hope that they come home, you know, happy and glad that they came.
Well, Matt, I'm sure I speak for everyone in Absolute Intense Wrestling and all over the wrestling world when we say you have made your mark, not only here but abroad. Thank you so much for joining me here today for Behind the Curtain. I know you don't really like these shoot interview type things, but I would love to sit down one day with you and get a full link one, because I think you have a tremendous story to tell. But for now, this has been Behind the Curtain with the M-Dogg Matt Cross. Thank you again for joining us, and good luck tonight here in the ring.
That's what I really like.